got a rant for you about rules. Rules. Now let's, first of all, make it real simple. You got a group of people, and one of the people in that group doesn't listen when the rest of the group complains about their behavior. Johnny, you keep coming in here with mud on your shoes. You track mud across the floor. The rest of us wind up getting dirty socks, or someone's got to clean it. You got to stop doing it. Don't want to. I'm busy. Can't worry about my shoes. So Johnny needs a rule. So, because you see, there are other ways to fix the problem of Johnny wearing his shoes, like automatic boot cleaners at the door, for instance, so Johnny can continue to be Johnny and you can stop having mud on the floors. But humans, they often fail to go for these ridiculously simple solutions to problems. Often. Because rules are quick and dirty. Seem to be an easy way. Plus, of course, we've got a whole lot of narcissists who really love telling people what to do. The rules fall right under that metric. So, you know, the narcissist in charge, because they always rise to the top, is listening to, you know, Joan and Johnny. I really got to come up with better names. Arguing about mud on the floor, and it's an opportunity to control everybody. So there's a new rule now. You have to take your boots off at the door, and it's a rule. It's not just a request. So we have a rule. Now, Johnny still doesn't want to take off his boots at the door. So he starts coming up with, or maybe let's go a different route. Johnny's intention was to put mud on the floor, because Johnny all along has been trying to get to Joan, because he knows how much she hates dirt and that she's the poor sucker who's got to clean it up. So now Johnny doesn't wear boots in the house, but he still spreads mud everywhere, smugly. He's found a way to bring the mud in anyway. So they changed the rules. Anyway, this little metaphor is going a little overboard. What started this was that I'm watching a really fabulous movie about a young woman leaving her Orthodox Jewish community to pursue a life independently. I was just in the beginning of it. But it all hangs, like some of the important plot points at the beginning hang on the idea that she wasn't able to carry anything when she left the house that day because it was Sabbath. And I don't remember how it was pronounced, the Shavuos or something. Something was broke, the Eruz was broken. And I'm like, what? And you look out, and it's an ordinary street. There's no indication of what's broken. Yeah, at first I thought, oh, nobody can go outside because there's a line down. They said the wire's broken, it's down in the street. So I'm thinking, oh, we've got a power down. Everybody's stuck inside. But then she puts everything in her pockets or doesn't bring it at all. Just brings a few things and then leaves. Just walks right out. I got nothing in my hands. I can walk right out. I'm like, okay, for some reason, you can't leave with stuff. So I researched it. I got on the old Google. You don't have to go down. You don't have to make notes and take them down to the library anymore. You can look it up right away. And what it is there's all these rules about how to behave in this community. And one of the rules is that you cannot carry things around on the Sabbath. Now, the original rule probably had to do with preventing people from being put into a serving capacity. One of the more common job roles, slave roles. And of course, the idea was for everybody to take 100% complete do-nothing day on the Sabbath. Nothing that isn't religious. But inevitably, people have to work. So it's like, woman, what are you doing? I'm taking a plate of rolls next door like I do every day. Well, you can't do that on the Sabbath. Anyway, so we had all these they just started tightening up the rules to prevent people from doing work. Oh, she can take a plate of rolls on the Sabbath. I told her to do it. Well, she's going to do it because my mom wants rolls. And I'm trying to make up a situation, but you can understand, you've seen in families how there's always somebody who's going to go, well, the rules don't specifically forbid it, so I'm going to do it anyway. That kind of guy. You got you can't do that and I'll make a rule to prove it. And you got unless the rule says it, I'm going to do it. And then you've got the, I'm smarter than all of you. Whatever you do, I'm going to find a way around it. And all along, really, it was about some really simple, basic rule of life. Like, take a break every week. Don't make people work when they're supposed to have a day off. Don't spread mud all over the floor. So, that little rule about carrying stuff, of course, people got to get around the rules. I guess if they spring especially, if they do a bunch of rituals based around on a wire and some poles, and then make statements about those wires and poles, and then string the wire up across the sidewalk so that you're walking under it. Now suddenly we have decided that anything under the wire is part of our house. So it's no different. So carrying rolls from the kitchen to the dinner table for Papa is no different carrying them over for Grandma in the house next door. And slaves got to work because we set up a way to make it part of our house. Yes, even all the way down the street to the factory is part of our house. No kidding. Yeah, so go get the factory cleaned. Go get your job done. It's a way of getting around the rules. But the upshot of it is that the Jewish Orthodox religion has so many rules that the adherents look rather like they have OCD. Victims of obsessive compulsive disorder, pray 3 times this way, pray 3 times this way, grab some virus off the doorway, apply it to your mouth, now you can walk in. Oh, another doorway, grab some more virus, pray 3 times in every direction, now you can walk through your entire life. When I see people with that many rules in their head, and I understand that, like recipes and stuff, a lot of that is just sort of rolls in on your brain. But are those people actually capable of their full creativity, their full ingenuity, their full inventiveness? Are they capable of stepping outside of those rules when they need to learn? And of course, one of the favorite themes in human storytelling is the one who steps outside the rules in order to be creative. So I think the answer to that must be not really. Those rules cripple a community. If the rest of the world hadn't gone on inventing, those Orthodox Jews would still be in the Bronze Age, I think. Probably, a lot of these very religious people would still be in those times. It's like, the Amish and the Mennonites trying to keep to 1870 or something, 1840, just before the industrial age. There's a lot of good reasons for it. I get it. I think a whole lot of people with this coronavirus are starting to get the slowed down pace, what was wrong with the Industrial Revolution and the workday, These are things that some of these religious rules are meant to address. But because of the interplay between those who cheat and those who dominate, those who cheat, those who dominate, and those in between who just want a quiet life, you get some really complicated systems. It gets ridiculous. And then, of course, there's a more universal fight going on, and this is the endless fight. This is the one that sends us to war. This is the one that pits neighbor against neighbor, boss against employee, child against parent. Fear. What does fear have to do with rules? People who are afraid, people who can't live with their fear, I should put it that way. We're all afraid. But some of us live with our fear like it's an annoying toddler in the room. We can't ignore it. But neither do we, and our life will get up completely overturned at times, but we can't let it take over our lives. But then there are other people who just can't stand it. I don't know what that feels like. I do understand that fear and pain and sorrow are supposed to be aversive experiences that you avoid. And so for some people, that lesson, I guess, gets drummed in a lot tighter. For me, fear, pain, sorrow, grief, these were things that could not be avoided. It didn't matter how hard I tried. By the time I was an adult, I understood that these things were parrots on my shoulder, monkeys on my back, things that were going to come and go into my life and out of my life willy-nilly without any regard for my feelings, my plans, or my attempts to avoid it. And so I learned to, well, actually, I had panic disorder as a teenager and used to recite the fear litany from Frank Hebert's Dune. Fear is a mind killer. Fear is a little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. And I repeat that, and I visualize that, and I say it with conviction to myself, mentally or out loud, when I am having a panic attack. And as it is intended to do, it brings me back. It's like, oh yeah, fear isn't a real. Fear is non-corporeal. To be corporeal is to have physicality, to have presence, to have being. Fear has none of these things. It is a powerful emotion. So for me, living with being afraid is, and some of my experiences in life that I don't see a point in detailing, have given me a really strong relationship with pain. And so fear, pain, I could go on. The point being, some of us are more capable of coping than others, and some of us simply can't. And I want to talk about the cowards in our world, because our cowards are often incredibly powerful people. Cowardice leads to grasping for power. Brave people don't need power. They feel strong enough because they know that it's outside of their hands. They're going to be alive until they're not. And in the meantime, you just do your best. You hope nothing terrible comes your way. You do what you can to prepare for it. You do what you can to avoid it, and you get on with living. But frightened people feel the desire. They believe somewhere in their heart that it is actually possible to get on top of it. Yeah, that is what it is. They think they can control everything. They think they can control the world. That if you could somehow reach that top spot, President of the United States maybe, and be in control of everything, and have all the money and all the resources, team of people making sure you don't get hurt, then finally you can stop being afraid. That's great, except that whatever you've done to give you the strength and power and resources to not be afraid can be taken from you. You can just lose it, unfortunately. There's so many ways to lose all that control. But so you've got all these people in society that are frightened and trying to control each other. They're trying to exert control over everybody else. They're making rules. They're making religions. They're complicating things. They're tying things up in red tape. This is why I always say, never trust someone who turns to making rules as an instant solution. If your first solution is to make a rule or a law, you're not trying hard enough. Seriously not trying as hard as you could. You could do much better than that. And meanwhile, there's all the brave people who are excited about the future. They're not afraid of it. They've gotten past that fear, and they're excited because they're curious and they're fascinated and they're involved. And that's the problem with fear, is it really takes you out of the moment. It sticks you into some fantasy dimension where you're machinating to create power to secure yourself. And you're not here in the world where life is actually happening. And the future that you're looking at in the world isn't an interesting, unfolding event like an adventure. It's something that you're constantly battling and struggling and fighting to control. It's your enemy. So you've got the brave person where the future is the story they're entering, and the frightened person where the future is the enemy they're fighting. And that is why fear, by the way, is so incredibly unhelpful. People who hold fear close to them, fear tells them that if you listen carefully, it will protect you. Listen to me. I am fear. I am going to keep you safe. And yet it's actually the thing that's killing you. It's creating a stress imbalance in your body. It's causing you to make stupid rules and laws. And like I said, it's distracting you from reality in your life. It's turning your future into your enemy. And it's turning you into the enemy of every living thing because you're trying to control them all. Because when you're frightened, somebody being a wild card is not okay. You don't trust them any more than you trust life. You don't trust anything. So you want them to stay in their place, keep to their lane, mind their own business, get their job done, shut the hell up, and do as they're told, and follow the rules. And now you have an oppressive system where the frightened people are bossing around the movers and the shakers who should actually be taking the human race to the next level. And I've seen this written up in quite a few novels. And in point of fact, that is what the novel Anthem by Ayn Rand was actually about. And it blows my mind how I haven't been able to find anyone else who read that. Anthem. I think that was it. Can't remember. It was the one about a communist society where nobody even uses the word I or me, where nothing is owned and nothing is belonging. And one individual who can't help exploring and experimenting and gets into terrible trouble for discovering electricity and light bulbs and trying to free his people from the oppression of candles and gets into terrible, terrible trouble for it. And that novel really set me to thinking. I remember reading all of Ayn Rand's work. That was the first one I read. And then I read the others, and over and over and over again. She was trying to teach that there needs to be a balance between the individual and the society, that being afraid of the future oppresses us all, that you cannot suppress and oppress everybody, that you cannot stop innovation, you cannot stop individuality, that all systems must account for that. Ursula K. Le Guin is another novel writer that I wrote a lot of, and she's another one that throws a lot of politics and philosophy into it, and again, who values something that I think of as socialist anarchy. Socialist anarchy is kind of like a mashup of socialism and libertarianism. It's a recognition that we are responsible for each other, but we have a right to independence. We have to look after each other, and we have to be individuals at the same time. It's not every man for himself. Crippled people, in a libertine world, you have to have somebody running around shooting people. You have to. Someone's got to execute all the miserable people because no one's helping them. So that's the trouble with libertine. The personal liberty, the freedom part is a beautiful and attractive thing. And it does allow, you can sit and argue personal freedoms all day and you'll win the argument. But libertines also refuse to be told to give. Now, the idea behind the libertine movement is that, the idea that these folks have is that enough of them will step up to the plate. It's like my idea about getting all the work done. People have often said, well, if everybody stopped working, who'd get it done? Not everything can be done by machines. And I say, well, there are people who would actually enjoy doing that and would do it. And I say that from the point of view of a person who really enjoyed being a janitor. I loved that job. I would love to continue to do that job. I didn't like the way people treated me for doing that job. The job I loved, the employment sucked so hard that I quit. Because people didn't didn't appreciate, recognize. It wasn't that I wanted to be elevated. I was lesser than everybody. I was actually considered less because of my job. Like, because I was a person willing to do that job, I was clearly of lesser quality than the rest of my coworkers. I was not a coworker. I wasn't even an employee. I was some underpaid subcontractor that wasn't part of the community and wasn't welcome, and it just wasn't pretty. Yeah. But the thing is, if all of a sudden you have to say thank you to somebody for cleaning the toilet, and you have to actually fist bump or elbow bump that person, we no longer shake hands. But you know what I'm saying? You have to actually interact with, regard the person who sticks their hand in urinals as a human being, or they might stop doing it and you'll have to do it. I could go for that world. That guy might even get paid properly for a change. Minimum wage is not enough. So we got the same thing going on with charity. We've got all these people assuming that someone's going to step up to the plate. History hasn't proven that to be true. The people that I've spoken to who make these noises are rarely students of history. They're not bookworms. They haven't read endless novels of the sufferings of man. They haven't studied religion. They don't know about how novel this idea of giving a damn about other people is, or how hard it is to teach it to people. They haven't studied history. They don't know how cruel we get. They don't know how cruel it's been. They will look at the history of their own lives and compare their childhood to their present and think that that is a historical experience, that tells them something about people in the world. It's a lovely fantasy, but there's a lot more to be learned than one lifetime can tell you. And that's what books and study and education are for. And let me tell you, when it comes down to it, people don't stick up for other people. The people who get the money are the people who don't care. The people who care lose all their money to the people who don't care. So then the people who need get nothing, because the only people who can do anything won't. That's when the people who care and no longer have the money all band together and say, hey, there's only one of him and 10 of us. Let's go have a chit chat with him about all that money. That's called taxation. They go over there and say, no, we're not going to wipe you out. But you are going to start submitting from all of this wealth you've been gathering a tithe. We want money back, and we're going to give it to those people that you just flippin' ripped off with overpriced rent and really harsh strategies and or bad employment. You know what I'm saying? You can't get wealthier than everybody else if you care about everybody else, because as soon as you've had enough, you start sharing. That's why nice people rarely get rich. You get people who occasionally, they will get rich without first having to kill all of their idealism. And they are possibly going to turn around and be humanitarians and philanthropists. And that's beautiful, but there aren't enough of them. And their sons aren't going to be like them. Their sons are going to be privileged little shits who think somehow that they're enlightened and above notions of privilege, and that their wealth is, being gifted to them by God because they are the wiser person to decide what to do with it. And as soon as they're done their vacation in the south of France, they're going to totally start that thing over in that country over there. You know what I'm talking about? That's the trouble with not having any government. So socialist anarchy is where you have a combination of extremely high personal freedoms, but through some means or other, extremely high governmental care. You've got a government, and its purpose is not to keep an economy going. Its purpose is not to keep businesses running. Its purpose is not to dialogue with and decide on wars with other countries. Its purpose is to take from the rich and give to the poor, pretty much essentially. Because when you give it to a religion, then the poor people have to meet metrics to get the reward. And the metrics are dependent on the local narcissist in charge. When it is all up to personal private charity, once again, the charity are at the behest of the narcissist in charge. When it is a democratically elected government with people who are accountable to their boss and to the rules that have been written about how they may behave, that's why we got rules, because people cheat. When it's a bureaucracy like that, the recipients simply have to meet the written down criteria. There's nothing personal. Nobody's saying, yeah, but she's had 3 boyfriends in the last 6 weeks. She's a slut. You shouldn't give her money. Why don't the boyfriends pay her? She might as well be a whore. You don't want to hear that kind of stuff because she might be a sex slave. And you don't know that. She doesn't have to tell you that. She shouldn't have to tell you that. Person should not have to lay their life on the line, open their heart, spew their guts and their tears all over your desk just to get the rent covered. And that's what the libertarian ideal, and that's what the religious ideal, that's what the let charity be handled by the charitable does. It creates a situation where in order for a disabled person or a disadvantaged person to get support from their community, they have to spill their guts and go through a traumatic event every time they go in the office. So, is your life any better now? Why not? There's always a narcissist in charge. I'm sorry, but narcissists are as common as suckers, okay? P.T. Barnum said there was a sucker born every minute. Well, the flip side of that, there's also someone born to take advantage of him every minute. And that's the two sides of the human. That's human nature. It is who we are. It's how we work. The narcissists get us ahead, especially when communities are at war. So they're in our community. They've been bred into the DNA. They're in us. You can't solve every problem with a rule. And ultimately, it would be nice to not have to use rules at all anymore. If you're one of those people that wants to use laws and rules as a final argument, I hope you heard how I feel about that. Because I just decided I'm not going to say that. And the rest of you, courage, my love. It ain't over yet.